very, very inspiring woman from South Africa. She is Executive Director of Gaia Foundation, a pioneer and visionary for ecological and social justice. And she will explain why the tech dream is turning into a nightmare. Please, ladies and gentlemen, welcome from South Africa, Liz Hoskin, opening Pandora's box.
Hi everybody. You've been having a good time over there? Okay. Now I want to ask, we're going to be talking about these machines. How many of us have them in the room now? Quite a lot of us. Okay. I'm going to be talking about them, but I had the privilege of living with indigenous people in the Amazon for quite a while. One of the things that they taught me is that when you want to think about something that's a really deep challenge, it's really important to go back to the story of origin, to understand the beginning of how this thing came to be. So I'm going to ask you if you'd be willing to do a little experiment with me. And if we can go on a little journey, remembering who we are and where we've come from, and where the goodies that make up our electronics come from. So are you up for that? A little journey of imagination, a little journey of remembering. Yeah? Okay, so what I would like to ask you to do is, can you sit comfortably? So, or you can lie, but just don't fall asleep, please. But just make sure you're really comfortable. And it's going to be a kind of meditative journey of remembering where we've come from. And this is an important thing to do, because in remembering who we come from, where we come from, we remember the journey of everything else that has come to be on our planet, and in fact the story of our planet. So I'm going to start off reading a little bit. If you could, close your eyes, take a deep breath, make sure you're really comfortable for this journey, and take a few more deep breaths to release any tension out of your body so you can really be with the story. And I'm going to ask you to come with me on a journey to the past, a journey to help us to remember who we are and how we came to be in this beautiful planet Gaia. Follow the journey long eons back to the first fire at the beginning of time, the immense hot birth of the universe some 15 billion years ago. You were there. I was there. For the cells of our body burn with the same energy today. We began long ago as great hot swirls of gas and dancing particles. Our galaxy formed, and then our sun. And then, our 4 billion years ago, our Earth was born. The Earth was rock and crystal, beneath which burned tremendous fires. Through eons, it cooled to below boiling, and it began to rain, and the oceans were born. In the warm seas under a brown sky, from this dance of rock and air, water and fire, organic life arose. Can you remember your life as a single-celled creature, a simple being floating in the Mother Ocean? And then time moved on, and some of us learned to utilize the energy of the sun directly and became plants. But you and I, from early on, took our energy from eating others, and we became one-celled animals. Can you remember our childhood, drifting in the warm seas. An immensity of time passed on. Our gills slowly changed to lungs. We began to breathe the rich, harsh air. As our fins became strong lobes, we used to drag ourselves through the mud of the receding lakes. And time moved on, and some of our cousins grew huge and toothy, while others let their legs become wings, their scales become feathers, their bones become hollow, their hearts become hot and fast. Their children today live as birds. And some of our cousins became lizards and turtles and alligators and snakes, crawling on bellies. They keep today the old wisdom, adhere to the old ways. And time moved on. We mammals began to spread across the land. We took on thousands of shapes, tried thousands of ways of life, and the ones that succeeded continued, and others didn't. All around us now, in the descendants of these cousins, are unimaginable storehouses of wisdom and diversities of ways. And so, time moved on. And the monkeys brought in another transformation. And we moved on, and our bodies became stronger and heavier. We began to balance easily on two legs. And we began to live in groups. We then began to learn language and symbols. And the beginning of the indigenous period began of our evolution. As indigenous people, we learned to move and adapt to different parts of our planet. Some of us learned to live in the cold, some of us in the rainforests, some of us by the sea. And we learned to observe, and we learned the laws of life. And we learned that we, as the community of life, need to participate in the cycles and laws of our planet. We learned that we as humans need to live with our cousins, the other animals, the other plants. We learned that all of life is imbued with spirit. We learned how to communicate with our ancestors. And amongst us, we always had shamans or seers, people with a particular ability to communicate with the rest of life. And they were the law keepers for us. They understood that our planet, that all of us in our planet played a role in keeping the balance of life. They understood that as we breathe out carbon, the trees breathe out the oxygen that we breathe in. They understood that our planet managed to keep life, the conditions for life, in a way that kept the temperature just at the right, just right for us to have life as we know it now. That the oxygen and the carbon and the content of the air was just right for life as we know it. And so they learned that as humans, we need to participate actively in maintaining this balance, because our living mother, that we are the cells within our living mother, and we participate with her laws. And then, thousands of years on, something happened. Some people, some humans who were living in the European part of our planet, began to introduce another idea. The idea was that the earth is not living, and there is no spirit. That the earth is a machine, and if we study the machine and we manipulate the parts, we can control life. And soon that led to the development of what we now know as the industrial period. And in this time, the idea that humans make laws was introduced. And increasingly, these laws that humans made were an attempt to override the laws of life. And increasingly, these laws legitimized our use as humans to manipulate the earth, to understand the earth not as a communion of subjects, but as a collection of objects. And soon we too were considered to be human resources for the industrial machine. And so those of us living today are born into a world that is very new. In terms of who we are and our story, this world is only a few hundred years old. This way of seeing our world and who we are is only a few hundred years old. And in those few hundred years, we find ourselves born into a crisis, many crises. We find ourselves born into a world where our planet's climate is completely destabilized because we have dug into the body of our mother and taken out the carbon that she and all her organisms put into her body and released it into the atmosphere. We have dug into the earth and taken out the minerals and metals that she has there for a very good reason, in order to make our machines. And in doing so, we, one species on the planet, has created the 6th mass extinction, the first time created by a species. And we have seen that our ecosystems are collapsing, and our seas are polluted, and our world is becoming more and more toxic. So now, if we can reflect a little on the journey we've been, and just think about why it is that we have chosen to incarnate now. Why is it that we are sitting here in this room, wanting to learn and reflect about Gaia consciousness? According to our old ways, as indigenous people, that long memory of life that we lived as indigenous people, we would know that we are all here for a reason, that we bring, each of us, a gift to contribute in participating, in being a living and mutually enhancing cell in the body of our earth. We are here because we've come to hear this. Let us spend a few quiet moments reflecting on why each of us are here and what each of us has come to bring to our beautiful and only living Gaia. A few moments of silence, please, while we reflect. And now, if you can slowly come back to the room, and slowly and in your own time, you can open your eyes and be here. And just hold what came to you as we go on, reflecting, remembering. Because it's from this memory of who we really are, as living cells in the body of a magnificent living planet, the only one we know that sustains this incredible celebration of life and different life forms. Even with all our science today, we don't know of any other planet that sustains life in the way that our beautiful Earth does. So it's standing in that ground of our deep indigenous roots in our beautiful earth that I want to reflect a little on the technology and where it comes from and how it comes to be and what we can do about it. So I want to reflect a little on mining and what mining or extraction actually means. This idea of mining not as a sacred enactment that some indigenous communities used to do at different times in the past, but mining as a devouring of things out of the earth to make things for us. That idea is only 100 odd years old. And in the last 10 years, there's been a huge exponential growth of mining. And the reason for that is that we have exhausted the concentrated deposits of the different minerals and metals and fossil fuels that the planet embedded in her body. And so mining, no longer can we go and extract these very concentrated areas. We have to now mine much larger areas. And so the prices have gone up of our minerals and metals, which has enabled the technology to become much more sophisticated. And so because we have to get smaller amounts from a bigger area, we also use more water to extract and separate the minerals and the metals that we need for our machines. And so the way mining happens is now different too. You've probably heard of mountaintop removal, fracking, which huge pressure and enormous amounts of toxic chemicals are pushed into the earth in order to release the gas out of the earth. In 2008, with the economic collapse, there was another spurt in mining as the pension funds and other investment world decided that it was much safer to invest in minerals and metals and real things than in all their imaginary markets they were investing in. So that gave mining another spike. Mining has grown so rapidly across the planet that the rules and the regulations that used to control mining as something that happened in concentrated areas is completely, it's not able to control what is happening. And we see the most incredible violations happening. We see conflict and violence associated with mining everywhere. It's always had that associated, but it's becoming worse. And we've been doing a few studies in a few countries and finding that actually mining is happening in so many areas that if you look at the total ecological footprint of mining, whole countries are toxified because water, huge amounts of water are extracted, the chemicals are released, and they go into the water system. The air is polluted around mining. The impact of mining is far greater than the area that it happens. Enormous ecosystems are destroyed. Huge craters are created in the earth, or mountains are blown apart. And so the impact is absolutely enormous. And basically mining is now threatening the very conditions for life. The clean air, the clean water, the biodiversity that we need, the ecosystems that we need to maintain integrity. And of course that is now starting to threaten the food system, because mining is governed by the old laws that used to say that if something was discovered, it was a national priority, because that is where the concentration of the mineral metal is. Now mining can happen literally anywhere. And so all of our countries say mining is a priority. In fact, a law is now being introduced in the UK because of the resistance to fracking to say that private property, nobody has right to stop mining even if they have private property. So the law is being used to legitimize this destruction. So we now are calling for all of you to support a campaign which we call Yes to Life, No to Mining, because mining is threatening life. And inspired by Gandhi and Martin Luther King and Mandela, as they all have said, a time comes when we have to say no. A time comes when we have to obey a higher law. And we know deep in our memory that the real law is the law of the earth. And this is deeply violating the laws that maintain the integrity of our planet. So the other thing I want to talk about is what are some of the things driving mining? And these gadgets are one of the main things. And that is because these gadgets are made within the belief system that economies have to grow and grow and grow and grow, breaking a fundamental law of life again. Nothing in the universe grows and grows and grows. So if you want your market to grow, then when you produce these things, or any of our technology that we all depend on today, you have to make them so they don't last. But you want your market to keep growing, so it's not good enough that people have one. So you create a whole lot of different versions on the theme. And then you create the need that we need all these different versions. And then you upgrade them regularly. So the upgrading now is happening 12 to 18 months. And you get a newer and better and shinier version of what you had before. And because this is a system held by a handful of corporates, if you don't get an upgrade, eventually you cannot communicate with each other. So the whole system is about driving us blindly to keep consuming these things without understanding the story of what it means to have these. And we've been doing some research on this, because if we're saying yes to life, no to mining, although this is a moral statement, we wanted also to show that it's practical. And so there is increasing resistance from people saying we will not buy the latest and that we have to produce these things differently. These and all other machines. And the logic is that we've already mined a huge amount of minerals and metals. If we use them responsibly, we don't need to mine more. That means we have to design in such a way that things last. And if we want to upgrade, we have to create a system where we can upgrade a part, take that out and put the new bit in. And we need to create a circular economy, which means that we lease whatever machines we want, and when we need or want, or we're promoted to have an upgrade, we hand it back, and that version is not recycled, but simply a part of it is exchanged, because recycling also costs energy. So these are some of the ideas that people are working on. And it's, interestingly enough, in the European community now, they're actually talking about bringing in a law that will enforce companies to do this. So it's not a fantasy, it's a real, it really is something that we can do, but we need enough of us to be pressuring for this. So we're not saying that we don't have these machines, but we're saying that it's the way we produce them and the way we use them that's critical, and that we are smart enough, if we're not caught into this belief system of an ever-growing economy, to create a different economy and a different way of producing these things. We've already dug stuff out. Let's use it properly, but let's stop digging. Fossil fuels is obvious. If we don't stop, we're going to be forced to anyway, and we have to stop because of climate change. There are the renewable energies, which themselves have a problem, but that also can be solved through a circular economy way of producing these machines, because they also need minerals and metals. I now want to just touch on another dimension of the machine world that we're born into. And that's the less easy to measure, but more dangerous aspect of these machines. And that is that they produce electromagnetic fields, as we know. And unfortunately, I missed the earlier talk, but I heard a bit of discussion on that.
Sorry,
yes.
Which type of machines are you talking about?
I'm talking about computers, laptops, TV, microwave, whoever uses those, most machines. And also, so in our homes, we have a number of these. And we know that, for example, the mobile phone, if we hold it to our head for too long or too much, we know that cancer and brain tumor is growing around the world. So please use those hands-free things. I see a lot of people holding these things to their heads. Please don't. Children have a much thinner skull, and so the frequencies can penetrate further. And so the EU is actually now looking at a law to set a certain age below which children should not have these machines. Then there's other things like insomnia. Some people, headaches, things that are difficult to actually place where it's from. But we are getting these vibrations, these different frequencies that different types of machines emit constantly at us. Some people are so sensitive that they can't go into places where there are too many of these machines, and that is on the increase because we're bombarded all the time with these vibrations. So those are some of the less easy to measure but more invisible and yet more dangerous kind of stuff. And then there's the social side. And I'm sure that many of us have seen and maybe are guilty of sitting at a table with somebody, having dinner and looking at our machines. Or in many social contexts, the machine takes priority. I'm sure we've all seen that. And I'm sure we're all observing and thinking about this. But the addiction that these machines have, be they the laptop or the mobile phone, they draw us in, they suck our energy, and they also distract us from communicating with each other or just being with ourselves. And this kind of creeps in as a behavior as we use more of these machines. So our argument is that we need to control our use of these machines and not let them control us. There's another dimension, which is language. The kind of language we use, the quick thanks, whatever, the new language that's emerging with the machines. Language is a critical part of who we are and how we express our full range of experiences. And as we narrow what we communicate with our machines and how we communicate with them and through them with each other, so our language starts to shrink. And this can have consequences that perhaps are difficult to tell right now. But these are things we need to be aware of. There's another dimension to this, which I think for this group and in this setting is probably the most important of all. And that is that through these machines, we're communicating a lot and we have a lot of information about a whole lot of things. But we're not communicating with the full range of who we are. Our bodies are becoming more and more static as we become more part of this industrial machine world. And as our indigenous memory will remind us, our bodies are the most amazing instruments of communication. We as humans have an amazing potential to think, to feel, to sense, to intuit. And as the story of who we are reminds us, we came to the earth as humans. We evolved as humans much later. The other animals and plants and the rest of our community of life were here before us. And so we came into a world of huge range of possibilities of communicating with our cousins, with our relatives. And for those of us who know a little about indigenous traditions, for indigenous people, literally, animals and plants are relatives. Plants are teachers. Some of you here, I'm sure, understand that. Plants take us on journeys.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So we need to communicate with these beings. We have the capacity to communicate with these beings. We're shutting that whole world off. With animals, animals are huge teachers. In all traditions, animals symbolize various parts of who we are as humans. And that world is being cut, not only physically, because we're destroying the very habitat of our relatives, but because we're narrowing our world into this very tiny frame of reference that's increasingly governed by machine world, machine language. So the two critical things, I think, in remembering who we are, is that all of us, our body, our mind, and our spirit, are all part of our intelligence. And to develop our human potential fully means developing all those aspects of who we are. That's what our true human potential is. That's who we are as humans. And also that in communicating with the rest of the Earth community, we are able to express and explore the complexity of who we are as humans. And those worlds we are literally physically destroying by destroying our planet, and destroying internally by narrowing our lives into this industrial frame. However, I think the good news is that I think things are so bad that if this isn't a wake-up call, I don't think anything will wake us up. If we see the levels of destruction and violence on our planet, the levels of abuse of power of the corporates, who are now, as we see, changing the laws so they can mine under our houses, who are trying to introduce laws that will make us criminals if we challenge or in any way impact on corporate, present or future corporate profit. This is called the TTIP, the Transatlantic Partnership Agreement. So there's all sorts of an absolute abuse of power that's going on. So this kind of extreme, I think, seems to be what we as humans need. There's always been voices, be it the poets, the artists, the ecologists, the mystics, who've been trying to warn us about this industrial way of seeing and being as really, literally suicidal. But now it's so bad and so obvious that really, if we don't wake up, then we're really finished. So I would suggest to you that it really is a time to think about those who've gone before us, who've had to deal with extreme and corrupt power. I mentioned Gandhi, Martin Luther King, and Mandela. And all of them stood up at a time in their context and said, enough is enough. And all of them mobilized movements of people to wake up and say no. It's what we call civil disobedience. And so those are our ancestors now. Those are our guides, I think, for now. And so some of the things that I would suggest to you that we can do now, and I hope we can hear more from you, is first of all, to always insist that we know the story of what we buy and what we use. What is the story of our mobile phones? Where does it come from? If we're going to use it, we need to take responsibility for it. What is the story of the food we buy? Has it been created by destroying and creating these deserts of monoculture with poisons that destroy everything living, including entering into our own bodies? How can we be supporting the shoots of the new that are emerging all over, like this amazing festival? Gandhi said, when he was resisting the British, he said, we need to not participate in systems of violence. That's the first moral code. And the second is put our energy into building the true alternatives, the life-enhancing, the mutually enhancing ways in which we as humans can live on this planet with other species. And that, to me, is really the moral of our time. How do we pull our support from the industrial system? How do we put our energy into creating some of the wonderful things that we've been hearing here? That's really the calling for now. And in terms of practicalities, how do we really use our machines consciously? How do we make sure that they don't run our lives, that we don't jump out of bed and switch them on, that we don't look at them at every opportunity, that we create our own social laws and personal laws about how these things, how we control them, and we don't let them sneak into our lives and take control of us. It requires a discipline. I speak for myself. I have to catch myself, and I think we all do. But the more of us who do it as a social movement, we start building that counterculture. I think also there are other ways. There are interesting new things going on now. For example, in the UK and some other parts of the world, there are techie guys who understand these machines who have what they call restart parties, where we can bring our gadgets and we can learn how to make them last longer. So we are practical, we are making them last longer, and we are communing, we are building a society and supporting those of us who really are trying to resist this mad consumption. There are lots of campaigns that I think it's really important for all of us to support, because it is a global movement that is going to make the change. Power never gives up power by sitting around a table. It's always been social movements, enough people who say no, a critical mass. And so I've told you about the campaign that we're launching with groups around the world that are fighting mining and are promoting food sovereignty. The yes to life, no to mining. And we're trying to make that a campaign that really makes visible a global movement saying no, and a global movement standing in solidarity with communities who are literally having their lives taken from under them. There are a number of other campaigns, but I think the food movement is also really important, because the more we take responsibility for not only what we eat, but the more of us who can either grow our food or support those who grow our food, so we start to reconnect back with the reality of life. Because what the industrial system does is it turns us into these blind, numbed consumers that just react to ads and the market strategies that they develop for us in a very conniving way. And we don't know where things come from. And it's damn hard work to work out where things come from. But there are organizations and groups working on this, and I think they really need all of us to support this. And then I think, above all, I would suggest to you that the most important thing that we can do, and that we can create a culture that really supports each other to do this, is to take time to remember and to connect with this beautiful planet. Because that's who we really are, and that's where we get the power from. The power of living force, the power of being connected to other living beings rather than machines. Not only the energy, but the psychic energy. And that's where we also reconnect with really who we are. Because who we are these subtleties, are these capacities that are in us as humans. that happen through relationship. And that's the feminine principle. So I would argue that the most important thing for us to do is to build that feminine principle in each of us, men and women alike, to really live our duty of care for life on this planet. This really is what's being threatened. And to be the nurturers and the caretakers of life, of a little piece of land, or even if we're in flats, make it beautiful with life, bring life back. We've destroyed so much habitat that our insects are going, our pollinators are going. Every little patch of green and of life counts as a counterpoint to this world that indigenous people say, we don't understand how it is that some humans have come to feel it's okay to destroy life and to create death. Machines are dead. The things that we create by destroying ecosystems are turned from life into death. Let's be the people who really nurture and bring back life on our planet and bring our consciousness of who we are as participants in a wondrous living universe. And now I want to ask you guys what you think about all of this and how we can strengthen a movement that says yes to life, no to mining and any other form of destruction. Thank you.
Anyone?
I might start by, well, not giving you a critique, but diving a little deeper into things that you have described. This 16 to 18 months change that you have described, this is actually Conway's law. The way we produce CPUs, central processing units, in computers right now, 16 to 18 months is the time frame in which their capacity will double, because the way we produce them, the die on the machine, on the CPU, the transistor is getting half its size every time we produce a new generation of that. We will reach an end with that in about 2030 or 2028, so it's close. But we are working on alternatives to that. So probably this mania of creating a faster and a faster machine won't stop. Also, I would have liked it if you would have gotten to, I mean, you're from South Africa, as far as I've gotten it. There are a lot of mining companies down in Africa who misuse people in order to dig these resources that you need to produce these devices, these gadgets that you have described. And if you say that we have to ask where they come from, this is one very important part. I mean, basically we send children down into mining shafts in order to dig graphite out of the earth. One thing that I can offer, I'm an informatician, is to rebirth computers, for example. I have very old computers sitting at my home and trying to use them. Something that you have described, the electromagnetic emitting of devices. FM emitters, if you put a telephone about 3 meters away from you, your telephone, your device won't be as bad to you as the waves that you already have in the air. So this is something that I think you have to grab at a whole another level than getting your device, because you cannot try to stay away from that. There have actually been descriptions of kindergartens or other places where they placed big transmitting stations right next to, and the children getting cancer over time. So this is this is not that hard to describe anymore because we have the evidence right now. And another thing is, I don't have a telephone, because if you are carrying a telephone around, basically what you have is a device that enables governments, for example, to find out where you are at about any time. All you need are 3 transmitting stations, and somebody can find out where you are if they have your number. And America has had these big stations for years. There have been reports about them ranging back to the 80s, and this is not NSA stuff, this is not new stuff. You can look it up on the internet, you can look it up anywhere. I don't know, there was, I think the first public television transmission about this stuff was from the Netherlands, from a female journalist who actually went into one of these buildings and looked up, just asked questions about what machines did there. And just so you know, the telephones you use right now, the encryption on these devices is as old as the Second World War. So because I make my money with hacking, I'm basically a pen tester. I'm doing this legal, don't worry. What I could do to this encryption is, all I need is a computer, maybe a big graphics card, because I had to do a lot of simple calculations, and a radio card. You can get radio cards for about $1,000, or you can build them for about $250. If you have that equipment sitting around in your home, about 3 kilometers away, you can grab a radio station. You can tell that radio station that you are a bigger radio station, and then you can grab packages from telephones. These are free packages. This is like metadata, what was the call. Then there's a package where's data, with data going through your phone that doesn't actually belong to you. And then there is a package which is your thought. Sorry, I'm just making it quick. There's been a program developed in, I think this was even a high school, not even a college, which you can use, which you can find on the internet if you have a radio card, and then you can grab any phone call that's about 3 kilometers away and read it out and listen to it, because people don't want to make the encryption behind those phone calls any better, because then governments have to spend more money on the equipment to decrypt them. So none of your phone calls are safe from anybody.
Thank you.
So
Yes.
Thank you for your talk. Really
Thank you.
enjoyable. I'm wondering because it almost seems like you, amongst many other people, have this idea that technology and computers and cell phones are separating us from planetary rhythms, from our connection to the Earth. And I agree to some extent that that's happening because of our misuse and because of the overdevelopment that's happened, and our rushing into these things without being really mindful about how it is we're using them. But I'm also wondering, since, like this gentleman said, technology isn't slowing down anytime soon, what you see the role of technology being in reconnecting us to the Earth, and what's in store in that realm. And you know, we see here that there's all this electronic music playing, and then we have digital art, and it's elevating our consciousness. And so is it possible for technology to reconnect us to the living systems? Yeah.
Thank you. Good question. So one of the things that we use technology for example, is building social movements. The Yes to Life, No to Mining campaign is precisely using the technology to connect people who are standing in solidarity for life. And I agree, I think technology can be used in a whole lot of positive ways. But for me, the message is, be careful, understand it, and control it, and understand that every piece of technology is wrought from the body of the Earth. And that's what we really have to control. And so we have to develop systems that make the most of what we've got, because the Earth cannot take more. because the way in which mining and extraction is happening now is on a massive scale and hugely toxic, and because of the scale is creating the most devastating toxic wastelands, and that's what we're leaving for the generations to come. So my feeling is that we now, every decision we make, this generation, those of us living now, is a decision that either leaves our planet in a reasonably better condition for our children and all the other species that our children will depend on, or if we go along with this, really the planet can't sustain it. So that's the critical thing. Yes, let's use it, and use it for consciousness and for connection with each other. I can't really think of how we can connect with plants and animals through machines, but maybe others can. But I think it is about connecting with each other and social movements right now, because it's the power structures that are so dangerous. And yes, they use the technology to monitor us, but the more of us who are standing together, the harder it is to deal with us.
Okay, I just wanted to mention one thing real quick, and then I'll turn it over. But there is a social movement that is sparking. There is a call to action in New York City in late September for a climate march, a people's climate march. And there should be like 500,000 to 1 million people coming out, and there's a big resistance to fossil fuel industry that's happening right now. And we just need more people to be educated and be a part of this. But it is sparking, and I just want to drop that seed in everybody's minds right now that it is happening. And there's a lot of artists that are creating, and a lot of creativity that's coming out. It's a lot of beautiful expression. So let's keep it going. Thank you.
Great, thanks for that.
Hello, is it Liz?
Yes.
Hi, Liz.
Hi.
I really, really appreciate what you said. It's really opened me up to a lot of ideas and notions.
Great.
The one thing I was quite curious about is that, you know, as you were describing the Earth and the Earth being our mother and everything being in its place in kind of like almost a natural state, and you were talking about the elements in the Earth and the metals and minerals and the things that we use to make our machines being in a natural place, and the fact that we're almost raping the earth and extracting these things. Well, what's kind of interesting to me is, see, I'm very positive and optimistic about how I see life, and for me, when I look at the history of our humanity, whether you look at the Egyptian Empire, the Roman Empire, tribes, I'm not obviously elements of humanity basically, we see there's been a history of corruption and a history of slavery and I guess kind of like evil in a way, you know, the aspects of the human nature that want to monopolize and dominate and make people slaves and etc, etc. But what I was kind of thinking, since we are a part of the earth and we are a part of Gaia, is maybe all these minerals and metals and whatnot that we've extracted from the earth, which we're creating our technology with, what I see now is because we have this wonderful, what I call is a wonderful sophisticated technology of the internet and everything else, we're becoming much closer as a global community, we're understanding each other a lot more, we're becoming much more aware of what's happening in the world. You know, although we have the flip side of lots of information on the internet which isn't so healthy, we also have the other spectrum of wonderful, conscious kind of information. So what I'm kind of wondering is, yes, we have extracted all these minerals from the earth, but in terms of our future and about the evolution of our consciousness and this healing spiritual revolution which may happen, perhaps the fact that we've taken these things out of the ground and created this wonderful technology is the solution to our transformation, because it gives us this, because somehow maybe we can become stronger together and create this wonderful message that penetrates everything and becomes much more widespread, and maybe somehow the power that we are together is going to be maximized by the technology. So I'm kind of wondering if the extracting from the earth has been part of the process that we needed to do in order to change things.
Okay, thanks for that. I think, good, lots of support for that. Okay. I agree with you and that's why I was trying to emphasize it's how we use what we have now developed, and it's how we make it, which are the two key things. It's here, so let's make the most of it, and we can, and I totally agree that it's connecting us in amazing ways. I also agree that human nature has a dark side, which we see in history. I was talking about the earth-connected side, and to me, as societies, we can we can have values and organize ourselves to bring out the best in human nature or the worst. I would argue that a society that sees everything as a machine and that exploits people and nature as resources and so on is not bringing out the best in our human nature. And so you hear people born into this time saying, oh, well, this is human nature. That's why I think it's important to look back and to see how we have lived in harmony and in a very deeply spiritual way, which doesn't mean that we didn't have negative things, but it meant that we controlled them. And today, indigenous communities who've managed to survive the industrial onslaught are trying to revive and bring back some of these spiritual earth practices. So I think, yes, it's here, let's make the most of it. I think another thing to remember is that when you talk to indigenous traditions around the world, we work with indigenous people who are extremely concerned about the destruction of sacred sites, because the way they see it is the earth as our own body. Those of us who understand acupuncture or know about acupuncture, they see the earth as having these energetic points across the body of the earth. And that indigenous people knew these, and these are places where the connection with spirit and ancestors is very, very strong. And these are powerful healing places for the earth and for humans. And they talk about a time when the shamans were able to communicate with each other, when shamans still today use gold and some of the materials in the earth to travel. So my question to us is that I think as humans we have huge capacity to develop all parts of ourselves without needing machines. The fact is we have machines here, so let's use them. But let's make sure we don't let the other parts of us atrophy because we put so much attention into the machines. I think like anything in life, it's about finding a balance, but really I think exploring those parts of us that we have been told are inferior or not relevant, our thinking, our feeling, our intuition, our bodies are all part of our intelligence, altered states of consciousness. All cultures have had different ways of collectively having rituals that take us into altered states, shared altered states. And these have generally been done with the cycles of nature, because this is how we as humans participate with the sacred earth, as part of the sacred earth. And so through meditation or through plant teachers, humans have always done that. The industrial world told us these are bad, and we know the story. Created, turned them into drugs and all the rest of it. So for me it's about the balance, and the main thing for me is just remembering who we are and looking back at some of those parts of ourselves as indigenous, non-Western world people, where we were developing amazing human potential in ourselves, and not forgetting that in the machine world. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, I wanted to say one thing. It's about, yeah, what you basically said was, it's all about balance. I'm personally a technical person. I'm very aware of technical things. One of the things, for example, that guy, that was a bit unclear for the most of us. For me, he was quite clear, but I'm a bit in between it, you know. I evolved out of these kind of things. The way I see it is like, okay, we're now in a consciousness change, and we need to use all the technologies we have and all the possibilities we have to make it work. We can only do that if we use everything. We cannot deny certain things, like, okay, we throw something out we don't like. You know, you cannot do that, because the fact where we are now, to get further, we need to use everything. The only thing you need to do is use it in a wise way. No, atom bombs is not something from now. It's built in an earlier stage, and it had a very different function where it was intended for. Okay, but that's something else. Okay. Plant obsolescence, that's, for example, also a problem. I know, I've seen. Plant obsolescence is not something you want to use. It's not the way I see it. No. It's not like that. Okay, plant obsolescence is indeed a problem. And yes, that's something you should dump first. That's for sure. But we now have, for example, an economy which needs a certain growth. And the only way to get that growth is to waste more and more. So that's really the problem that's the basic problem. And if you cannot change, you have to change that first. And that's the sad thing, you know, that's the catch-22 where we're basically in. So basically, it's like, you know, the resources we use must be used very consciously, and then the technical things we use must work in a way that we are in balance with the earth. We shouldn't put things away. We only need to change it in a way that it's in balance with what we have, so we don't destroy it. That's what I want to say.
Thank you. I would just question that a little. I think something like genetically engineering plants and animals and humans. So,
I agree with that. That's something, yeah, that's true. But
so one of the things that we had an interesting experience where we took some scientists who were negotiating in one of the big biosafety discussions at the UN, and we took them to visit some shamans in the Amazon. And we thought, well, we'll have to describe what genetic engineering is. And one of the shamans said, look, we know what you're talking about. And the guys who were these big negotiators thought, oh, funny, these primitive guys understand this. And they didn't really think that. But what the shaman said is that through shamanism, you can take the energy or the thought, if you like, of, say, a bee and put it into a person and make them go crazy. So that he said we can do things shamanistically that we have got together and decided not to do. And in many of the discussions that we've had in talking, for example, how do we change our society so that we shift from an obsession with ourselves, a human-centered consciousness, to an earth-centered consciousness, understanding ourselves as part of the body of the earth. And one of the things that we kept coming up against is that in a world where we think the individual rights, freedom to do anything, one of the hardest things for us to do is to say no and to actually control our excesses. And so one of the things I think we do have to do in looking at what this industrial system has created is there are some things that somehow humanity has to decide collectively to say no. Atomic bombs is one example. I mean, who knows? That is going on around the world. So once we create these things, it's pretty difficult to control. But I think that is part of our challenge, is that when you have a value system, and for me that's why when we connect it to the earth, then it's easier for us to choose not to do certain things, because we are connected deeply into a living system. And we couldn't do it because as indigenous people say, the law is written in your heart. That's the law of the earth. This written law is something invented just a couple of centuries ago by humans and for humans, and in fact only for a handful of powerful humans. So it's how do we get that law of life written into our hearts, so we simply can't do things that violate each other or violate life. And it's possible. I mean, that's how indigenous people who survived in the Amazon for thousands of years, the basis of the way they live is according to the laws of the earth, which are a philosophy and a practice. And those who didn't died. I mean, they destroyed themselves. So that thing of constraint, how do we have the values and the feeling and the passion for life to the point that to constrain ourselves, we have the energy and the self-discipline to do that. So I think there are some things we have to say no to in other words.
Hi. It's always a pleasure to hear people spread these kind of messages, or this message, but isn't the real problem and where we should be concentrating all of our energy, education? Because obviously here we're a bunch of conscious or ready to be conscious people, but most people out there aren't, and especially the ones governing us. So
yeah. Another person that I think that you would all enjoy is somebody called Thomas Berry. Thomas Berry is a cultural historian, and he wrote about the petroleum era, he wrote about the industrial system, and he wrote a lot about how do we shift from a human-centered consciousness to an earth-centered consciousness. And he talked about the main institutions, the institution of law, of economics, for education and religion. And he said all of these institutions obviously have to transform. He argued that law was one of the most urgent, because he said at the moment law is being used to legitimize destruction. And so we have been working for the last decade or so on this idea of what we call earth jurisprudence or earth law, which are the laws that underpin life, and which are the laws by which humans need to regulate themselves once again as we used to do. I think education is a huge question, because again, when talking to indigenous people about education in the Western world, they kind of look at us and they say, but do you really think putting kids in 4 walls and putting stuff in their heads, is that really what education's about? And they actually, in the Amazon in Colombia, they developed their own education system. And the education is outside. And you ask the kids, you know, what do you want to learn? And they say they want to learn about fish. And you go down to the river and you learn about fish, and you learn mathematics and biology and all sorts of things around the fish. So there's, I think, creative education, yes, and to me, experiential education. That's why I think Joanna Macy's way of working with people is fantastic, and children just love it. So I think, you know, the basis of our industrial education is this idea of tabula rasa, that we're kind of, you know, blank, nothing inside. So we have to shove information into our heads to become educated. Whereas others, also in the Western world, like Rudolf Steiner and Montessori and others, talk about that, especially children, are very connected to the spirit world and the world of nature. And children have a huge amount of knowledge and wisdom, and it's about drawing that out. Educare means to draw out of. So to me, you know, it breaks my heart to see these kids sitting in these bloody 4 walls, you know, more and more homework, more and more stuff shoved into their heads. It kills the spirit, kills the imagination. So yes, education, deep transformation is required.
Thank you.
So, I said it was the last one. I have one more.
Thank you for your talk. It was really nice how you pointed out the connection between having the phone and destruction in mining. I think one way we can find out of this confusion we're in spiritually is by concentrating on community and living in community again. I think that is what technology deprived us of in the first place, when it took apart the families and the tribes. And this is kind of an easy thing we can do. We can live in tribes instead of living all alone with maybe a kid.
Yes, and of course, a big thing is not only with the kids, but with the elders. In traditional society, elders are considered to be the ones that are wise, that have a huge connection with the children. There's a spiritual connection with children and grandparents, for example. And so the elders and all the different age groups are part of what community is. It's bringing back these wholes again. And again, indigenous people talk about how the Western world fragments community, fragments us as individuals, and fragments our relationship to nature. So maybe, I think this has to be the last word, but I think one of the things that's really important as part of our worldview is that in most indigenous traditions across the world, and this is the interesting thing about how similar we are in our diverse expressions, but the 3 elements that we need to keep a balance in our individual and collective lives is between the human community, the rest of our earth community, the rest of the beings and the species that we depend on and live with and interact with and commune with, and the spirit world. So those 3 domains or dimensions of life are the 3 that we need to keep a balance. And I think the acknowledgement of that is that humans need to consciously live with the law in our hearts, so that, as Thomas Berry said, we recognize that everything that exists as part of the living planet has a right to be, a right to habitat, and a right to participate in the evolutionary process. So that's one of the fundamental laws which perhaps we can all write in our hearts, and just explore and live with and see how it changes our relationship to the rest of our beautiful Earth community. Thank you.
Great round of applause for Liz Hoskin, please.